Some musicians memorise faster and more reliably than everyone else, not because their memories are better, but simply because they go about memorising in a different way. After helping over 10,000 musicians play perfectly from memory, here are the top 6 tips I found that will help you memorise pieces quickly and never forget them. Tip 1. The biggest mistake I see a lot of people making is that they practice a piece first and think, I'll memorise it later once I've got all the technical bits sorted out. And it feels logical, like you're building a solid foundation. But this is a terrible idea. The research is clear. The people who memorise best are the ones who start earliest. So tip number 1 is start early. If you know you'll want to play a piece from memory at some point in the future, then you're making life much harder for yourself if you don't start memorising it right away. Now, don't worry, this doesn't mean that you have to sit down and try and memorise the whole thing before you do anything else. What it does mean is that you make at least an effort to memorise a tiny bit at every practice session, including the very first one. So maybe you work on an entire section and then you just try playing just one bar of it from memory. That's enough. You're sending your brain a signal of intent that this is where we're going, so you'd better buckle up. Tip 2. If you're trying to memorise and you find it a real struggle, that's a problem, right? You're doing it all wrong and you might as well give up and go home. Well, actually, no. You see, that seems logical, but it's completely the other way round. The truth is that the only time that things are moving deeper into your memory is when you have to struggle to do it. Memorising a piece, you see, means making physical changes in the brain. And the brain only changes when it realises it can't do something easily. So endless repetitions without struggle do nothing to improve your memory. It's only when you have to fight to remember the answer that you learn more. So tip number 2 is struggle before you check the answer. Don't go back and look at the music every time you can't remember something straight away. Struggle for a while. You'll be surprised what comes back after a few minutes' effort. And everything that does come back is now etched far more firmly in your memory than it was before. Repetition without struggle creates familiarity, yes, but not real long-term memory. And this is why the fact that you've played something hundreds of times from the score usually does absolutely nothing to help you play it from memory. And it's also why you can have no trouble playing something from memory one day, but then you come back the next day and it's gone. 2 great ways to bake this in. First, start every practice session by playing from memory before you look at the score. And that way, you can be sure that you're retrieving the music from your long-term memory. Second, as your memory of a piece gets stronger, leave gaps of a few days rather than playing it every day. And this gets you into a place where you'll have to struggle more and therefore drive the memories even deeper still. Tip 3. If you had fewer things to remember, then that would be easier, right? Well, it turns out that you can choose to reduce the amount that you need to memorise for any piece of music. When you start to view certain groups of notes as units rather than individual items, then things become much easier. So tip number 3 is scan the piece for patterns. You're looking for any larger unit, pattern or category that you can identify. And this includes anything you recognise from music theory, so scales, arpeggios, chords, chord progressions and so on. But it could also be all sorts of things that don't have a name, or at least not a name that you know. What have you ever noticed that sounds like a thing to you? What little phrases have you practiced as a technical exercise? What finger patterns have you done? What rhythms have you worked on? Anything that feels like a thing to you can be a chunk. Maybe it is a theoretical thing, but you don't know its name. No problem. Maybe it's something genuinely unique to you that no one else in the world would ever think of. No problem. And know that as you continue to work with this, you'll be able to see bigger and bigger things as chunks. At first, it might just be 4 notes from a scale here, or, oh, that's a Charleston rhythm there. But then, you might even start to see whole phrases or sections as chunks. Maybe not every single note, but the big picture structure will call to you. Oh, that's a 3-6-2-5-1 progression in D major with a modified song clave rhythm resolving to G major at the last minute and then a classic Take the A Train ending. And this reveals one of the most powerful things about patterns. The things that are exactly the same are hugely helpful, but so too is noticing what's different. When you can say, that's a song clave rhythm, but with an extra note tagged on the end, well then you've still made it into a recognisable pattern that is much easier to remember. So notice the things that look the same and the things that are slightly different. It all helps. Tip 4. The sooner you play a piece from memory, and the more often you do it, the stronger your memory will hold up in performance. So once you've got a piece memorised well enough to play through it with a bit of thought, well before it's performance ready, then there's really no excuse for using the sheet music anymore. So tip number 4 is practice only from memory once it's in there. Avoid the temptation to reach for the sheet music out of pure laziness. And you don't even have to wait until the whole piece is solid. When you're mostly there, but with a few memory problem spots, then you can still practice the good bits only from memory. And when you do this, you're giving yourself many more repetitions playing from memory. Why on earth wouldn't you want to do that? And it's also working as a rolling check on whether there are any bits that are shaky. So yes, it feels like a bit more work and effort to practice from memory, but it pays off in so many ways. So don't handicap yourself unnecessarily. As soon as your memory of the piece is solid enough, put the music away for good. Tip 5. No one is immune from memory slips. So don't expect your memory to be 100% perfect. No matter how well prepared you are, it's always possible for something to go wrong. So the act of memorising a piece well is only partly about getting the memory into your brain as solidly as possible. It also includes having the ability to carry on and still deliver a great performance if something goes wrong. Now that way, a little micro slip won't snowball into something much worse. So tip number 5 is practice playing through memory slips. Here's how. When you're doing full run-throughs, always play through to the end of the piece, even if something goes wrong, because that's exactly what you'll have to do in a real performance after all. And this is an excellent start, but I think you owe it to yourself and to your audience to go even further, because you don't want to be merely capable of playing through mistakes. Okay, you want to be a master of it, and that's when you lose all fear of memory slips. And the process of doing this is extremely simple. Run through whole sections or whole pieces before you have memorised them solidly, and deliberately do this at the point where you are highly likely to experience memory slips. And don't stop if you run into any difficulties. Instead, force yourself to keep going to the end however you can. This might be by filling in a gap with notes that you know are wrong. It might mean you jump ahead a few bars, but you keep going without a break. Or use anything else that gets you through. The way to find and learn to use options that work is to put yourself in situations like this where they're required and see what appears. And as you do this regularly, you'll recognise the different options available to you and when each one is a good choice. Tip 6. I used to believe that memorising properly meant more work, but what I eventually learned was something a little bit more subtle. So memorising reliably doesn't mean practising more overall, but it does mean practising more carefully at the beginning. So tip number 6 is go slow now to go fast later. In the early stages of learning a piece, you want to go slower. You want to take more care and spend more effort than you might be used to. But that upfront work is exactly what allows the music to lock in properly. So while a previous version of you would still have been repeating passages endlessly, hoping it sticks, and worrying whether your memory will be solid, you're no longer fighting the piece. The memory is already there. And although it feels slow and quite a struggle to start with, the total amount of time and effort that you're going to use goes way down because you're not relearning the same material over and over again. You're building something solid once and keeping it. But once you've memorized the piece, you still have to practice it effectively so that all the technical aspects are rock solid. So check out this video next where I show you the 4 practice trips that will get you playing pieces at pro level in quick time.